The antidote to control is learning to control yourself. For me, nothing has helped more than building healthy boundaries. They showed me that I have far more choices than I thought I did. They helped me realize I actually do have the ability to shape my life. I have the ability to have way more control over my life than I ever imagined, and it is so freeing. Hi, I'm Barb Nangle. I want to welcome you to my podcast, Fragmented to Whole, Life Lessons from 12-Step Recovery. If you're tired of feeling fragmented and overwhelmed, this podcast is your guide to creating a life of wholeness, authenticity, and healthy boundaries. I'm a woman in recovery who is also a boundaries coach and speaker. I share raw and honest insights from my own journey and the principles of 12-Step Recovery. Discover how to set boundaries without guilt or shame, overcome people-pleasing tendencies, manage your emotions effectively, cultivate a stronger sense of self, and build healthier relationships. My approach is raw, honest, and sometimes a little bit, a lot sweary. I'm an avid beachcomber and a formerly closeted fan of the Hallmark Channel, especially Christmas movies. I wear fingerless gloves almost all year round because my hands are always cold. And I love taking pictures of license plates with my initials BN on them. I don't speak for or endorse any particular 12-step program of recovery. Though I'm a huge fan of 12-step recovery and a member of two such fellowships, I cannot speak for them. If you're ready for real talk and practical tools for transformation, keep listening. This is episode 331, The Hidden Rules You Learned Growing Up and How to Rewrite Them. This week, I want to talk about the 4 internalized modes of thinking and acting that are characteristics of adult children. Since this month's theme here at Higher Power Coaching is family, this feels like the perfect time to explore what so many of us absorbed without knowing it. And for some of you, these patterns didn't come from your family of origin, at least not directly. They might have come from the culture you grew up in, from your neighborhood, or from a very influential organization that shaped your beliefs. The 4 modes of thinking that show up again and again in families of dysfunction are perfectionism, control, all or nothing thinking, and judgmentalism, which in ACA is often called the inner critical parent. Before I dive in, I want to say a word about ACA. If you're not familiar, ACA stands for Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Families. It's also sometimes called ACOA. It's a 12-step recovery program, but it's also a reparenting and trauma recovery program. I didn't even know I qualified for ACA. And honestly, when I first heard about these modes of thinking, I thought none of them applied to me. Over time, I realized all of them did, and some still do. In ACA, step 1 says that we are powerless over the effects of growing up in an alcoholic or otherwise dysfunctional household. The main effects, according to the literature, are fear and distorted thinking. So learning to notice the ways you think, learning to accept that this is how you've been thinking and learning how to change it is absolutely central to recovery. And since the source of the problem is a lack of power, the solution requires a power greater than ourselves. For some people, that's God. For others, it's not. It might be nature, the universe, or even the power of the group. But the point is that it's not you. You don't have to generate all of this change by yourself. Now, right before I started recording, I just spontaneously went into the ACA version of the Serenity Prayer, and it reminded me that the part where it says the courage to change the things we can, one of the most frequent things that we can change is our thinking about things. So people around us don't have to change, but we can change what we make their actions mean. So keep that in mind. All right, so I'm going to start with perfectionism. I'm going to read a short excerpt from the ACA Big Red Book. It says, There's a difference between parents challenging their children to reach higher and improve and the damaging perfectionism in which the bar keeps being raised beyond reason. Perfectionism is a response to a shame-based and controlling home. The child mistakenly believes she can avoid being shamed if she is perfect in her thinking and acting. However, expectations are continually raised in these kinds of homes. Shame, or the feeling that we have failed our parents, seems to occur no matter what we do. During these moments, a critical inner voice begins to form. This is an early sign of internalizing our parents' or caregivers' hypercritical attitude. These are the seeds that lead to a lack of self-acceptance. So that's the excerpt, and I want to tell you, I never thought of myself as a perfectionist. In last week's episode, my guest Renee said she always thought a perfectionist was someone who got all A's. So even her definition of perfectionism was perfectionistic. It took her a long time to see that tendency in herself. And I was very much the same way. I still don't call myself a perfectionist, but I absolutely have perfectionistic tendencies. And I didn't see them until I'd been in recovery for quite some time. Here's how I finally caught it. As you may know, I have kept a nightly gratitude journal for over 25 years, and I've also done other types of journaling over the years. And a few years into recovery, I realized that even in a journal that I never go back and read, and that means no one else is ever going to see what I wrote, I would not allow myself to misspell a word, misuse punctuation, or use the wrong capitalization. I would literally go back and fix it. And then one day, I don't even remember what triggered it. I just let it go. And now when I misspell something in my journal, I kind of get a little bit giddy. I think like, who cares? Also, just like typos are kind of funny sometimes. I'll call them rightos are also funny sometimes. I know what it means when I write something and misspell it or whatever. I'm not going to read it again, and letting go of that was a huge shift for me. I do this for my personal development, not to be a perfectionist. So that moment helped me see that I had unreasonably high standards for myself in a lot of areas. One of the places it shows up the most is in overgiving. Twice just this week, colleagues pointed out to me that I was overgiving in my business again. I have this internal pressure to give people way more than they expect or even want because I want to eliminate any room for criticism. That is perfectionism in disguise. Now, perfectionism is not the same as having high standards. High standards stay in place. Perfectionism means the moment you reach the bar you set, instantly it moves higher. You might get a millisecond of relief and then boom, now you have something else to judge yourself for. Growing up, my dad was always hyper-focused on grades and college. I used to think that I made the honor roll almost all the time. And, maybe it was like one grade. And then when I was in my early 20s, I found my old report cards and realized, nope, I did not make the honor roll all the time. But often it was just one class. And what I remember my dad saying was things like, these A's and B's are nice, but let's talk about this C. And talk he did. The message underneath all of those well-intentioned lectures was basically, you could do better and you're not. You're failing. It was never good enough. Perfectionism creates tension in your body. It makes it very hard to relax in your mind and in your body. You feel rigid and tight all the time. The antidote is practicing good enough B- work, as Brooke Castillo says. Dan Martell puts it another way. 80% done is 100% awesome. If someone else does something in your business 80% as well as you, that is still awesome because it frees you to move on to the next thing. Learning to live at that 80% mark has been liberating for me. All right, so let's move on to control. I'll start with another Big Red Book excerpt from page 39. Of all the modes of thinking adult children develop to survive childhood, control seems to be the most troublesome to address. Fear is the root of this toughened element of our personality. We either seek control or we feel controlled by others. Control affects our choices and our thinking. It affects our interpersonal relationships and our relationship with a higher power. To ask an adult child to surrender control is like asking someone to leap from an airplane without a parachute. That is so true. If you talk to anyone in any 12-step program, we all have control issues. We honestly believe that if things would just go the way we want, everything would be fine. As a codependent, my main form of control was people-pleasing and overgiving. What I was really trying to control was what you think of me and how you behave toward me. One of the sneakiest versions of control in my life is what I call controlling to be helpful. I jump in to help so things will go the way I want them to. Now, luckily for me, I now have people in recovery who know me well enough to say, Barb, I think you are being controlling to be helpful here. I need that feedback because this is so subtle that I often can't see it. What sits underneath control for most adult children is this belief. I can only be okay if you are okay, and especially if you are okay with me. So all our energy goes outward towards managing other people's emotions and behaviors. The work is turning that energy inward and learning to make ourselves okay. It's a massive shortcut. That is internal safety. It's the foundation of healthy boundaries. It's actually the reward of healthy boundaries. When I worked at Yale, I got feedback from everyone around me that I took on too much and didn't delegate. When I finally asked myself why, I realized it was about control. One example was when my boss brought me last-minute tasks. I wouldn't delegate them because I wanted to buffer everyone else from her last-minute nature. I thought I was helping, but I was controlling their workload and their perception of her and their perception of me. I didn't want them to think I delegated at the last minute. But then I realized they know it's not me, it's her. They were grown adults who could say no if they needed to. I had to learn to let people manage their own lives. I also realized that I believed that no one could do things as well as I could. But when I thought about all my colleagues, they were all highly competent, and some of them were actually better at certain things than I was. And once I saw that, things opened up for me. The antidote to control is learning to control yourself. For me, nothing has helped more than building healthy boundaries. They showed me that I have far more choices than I thought I did. They helped me realize I actually do have the ability to shape my life. I have the ability to have way more control over my life than I ever imagined, and it is so freeing. The next mode of thinking is all or nothing thinking, or what some people call black and white thinking. Here's another excerpt from the Big Red Book. With perfectionism and control as our guideposts, most adult children operate with all or nothing thinking before finding ACA. In codependence, options melt away and compulsion takes over and the thinking process. ACA makes a distinction between being decisive and all or nothing thinking. Being decisive means we have seriously thought about our options and picked a course of action. In all or nothing thinking, we usually don't consider options. We push forward with fear or closed-mindedness. Black and white thinking shows up both externally and in what we say, externally in what we say and internally in what we think. In unhealthy homes, opinions are often attacked with sweeping statements and everything becomes absolute. Now, the phrase I hear most often that signals black and white thinking is this: I did not have a choice. That is the epitome of black and white thinking. One option, one path, no alternatives. But it's never true. You might have two shitty options, but you always have options. Let me give you an example. Someone says, I can't call in sick to work because I have no sick time left and I'll get fired. I did not have a choice, or I do not have a choice. Well, actually, you do. The choices are stay home and possibly get fired or go to work sick. They both suck. But you still get to choose. And when you realize you're actively choosing, you get to stop complaining about the boss or the policy or the company. You get to simply go to work, do your job, and conserve your energy instead of draining yourself with resentment. I once worked with a woman who said she had no choice but to take over her family's business as a young single mom. I gently pointed out that she actually did have choices. She could have let the business fold. She could have taken a job elsewhere. She could have hired help. She could have found a partner. I came up with 5 options in about 3 seconds. What was sad was not that she had believed that she had no choice back then, but that for 20 years, she still believed she hadn't had a choice back then. And she taught her daughters, you're going to inherit the business too, because she didn't have a choice in inheriting it from her father. And what she revealed to me was that he also believed he had no choices when he inherited it and he didn't want it. That is the legacy of distorted thinking. Entire family lines passing down the belief that they're trapped. Black and white thinking is everywhere. It shows up in words like never and always. It shows up in phrases like I have to, I should, or I must. Shift that to I get to or I could, and the world opens up. One of the greatest freedoms of recovery and one of the greatest freedoms of healthy boundaries is the freedom of choice. And the number one choice we have is the freedom to choose what we think. We can change the channel. We do not have to let our automatic thoughts run the show. The last mode of thinking is judgmentalness, often called the inner critical parent in the ACA program. Here's an excerpt from page 48 of the Big Red Book. Anyone who doubts that they have internalized a parent's behavior only needs to listen to the internal critic. The voice brings self-doubt and second-guessing. It turns us into reactors rather than thoughtful actors. The voice often repeats the exact words our parents used. We realize how harsh we can be toward ourselves. Sometimes this voice is subtle. Sometimes it's more of a feeling than a voice. The critical inner parent brings together perfectionism, control, and all or nothing thinking. Until we find ACA, we believe that something is wrong with us, and this voice reinforces that. For me, the part of this reading that really jumps out is that the inner critic can be more of a feeling than a voice. I had a deeply rooted feeling most of my life that I needed to shrink back, get smaller, back off. And I never had words that went with that feeling. That is not until I was in a yoga nidra class, which was part of a yoga for a 12-step recovery program, and something clicked. The facilitator asked a question, which I wish I could remember the exact phrasing of, but it opened up something in me. I suddenly realized that I believed I was too much. Once I could name it, I could work with it. My antidote became this statement: I'm just the right amount of everything. And now I actually believe it. Now, I might be too much for some people, and that's fine. They're just not my people. Other people might be too much for me, and that is also fine. I don't need to adjust myself for everyone else. I get to adjust myself for me. I also want to add that I didn't know that I had an internal critical voice until I was in my late 20s. I read a book where the author wrote out some of the negative self-talk her clients used. And I was like, oh my God, I say that shit to myself. I didn't even know that was happening until I saw it on the page. Now, the book taught a process. First, you have to see your thoughts. You can't change what you can't see. Then it taught you to look at what's happening around you that triggers that thought, and then you replace it with something kinder. Once I went through that process, I thought, I'm fine. Then 20-something years later, when I got into recovery, I realized, oh no, there was way more negative chatter in there. I always saw myself as a powerful woman of agency, someone who liked herself, and those things were true. But underneath that, I had a constant stream of negativity that I didn't even know was running. I ruminated about the past. I replayed conversations and events over and over. I catastrophized constantly, which is what I call living into the wreckage of the future. Both patterns set my nervous system on fire. They triggered huge fear responses. And I didn't know they were happening until recovery helped me see them. Now I rarely, if ever, ruminate. Now, catastrophizing has been reduced by like 95%. When it does come up, I change the channel immediately. Often, for me, the signal is not the thought itself. It's the physical shift in my body. My chest tightens, my heart rate changes, I get a flood of the internal drugstore, and that's my cue. I also used to blame, complain, and gossip constantly. All of this comes from the inner critical parent. It's like having a factory of criticism in your head. Recovery is about coming out of denial about these modes of thinking. It's about looking at where they come from, not to blame our families, but to state the facts and understand the causes and conditions that created them so we can unlearn them. Now, sometimes you don't need to know where something comes from to unlearn it. You just need to stop doing it. But other times, knowing the root helps the healing land more deeply. It helps to take the onus off of you of blaming yourself from being this way. So I would love to hear from you. Which of these modes of thinking shows up the most for you? And what have you done to move through it? So go ahead and send me an email, barb@higherpowercc.com. I'd love to hear from you. They are all intertwined, and honestly, it's really hard for me to pick which one has been the hardest for me. But I wanted to share all this because this month we're talking about family, and this is not about disparaging your family. This is about seeing clearly, becoming aware, and choosing something new. That is the work, and you deserve the freedom that comes from it. If you've been waiting for me to run a boundary boot camp, this is the moment. People have been asking me to do this for years, and it's finally here. On January 1st, I'm hosting a 6-hour boundary boot camp that's going to set you up with real clarity for 2026. You'll get coaching from me, worksheets you can use again and again, and a ton of content from my boundary library, including my writings and my most powerful podcast episodes. If you're ready to stop overgiving and start honoring yourself right from day one of the new year, come join me. This is your reset. And the best part is you won't be doing this alone. You'll be surrounded by others who are starting the year committed to making different choices so you get the support and energy to carry this work forward. Go to higherpowercc.com/bootcamp for details. Thanks for listening. If something here resonated, come connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm at Barb Nangle. I'd love to hear what you got from this episode. And if you'd like support building healthier boundaries in your personal, professional, or romantic life, you can book a free 30-minute Say No Without Guilt consultation at barbchat.net.